Hello and welcome. Ukrainian armed forces have commenced their counteroffensive activities, including an amphibious operation over the Dnipro River. This and more in the situation report. The Russians are increasingly using Shahid drones again they are mostly used to identify Ukrainian air defense system, at least according to the head of the Ukrainian Joint Coordination Press Center of the Southern Forces, Natalia Humenyuk. A Russian Sukhoi 34 fighter bomber has dropped two bombs onto the Russian city of Belgorod in an accident, and in a surprising event compared to the past. The Russians actually admitted that it happened and said it was an accident. Whether it's smart to fly a fighter bomber loaded with bombs, as you can see here, flying it over a crowded city is a different story. Obviously, it could have killed a lot of people if those bombs had hit an apartment block. This way, though, 3 civilians were wounded, but no fatalities are being reported. The pictures showing here the damage on the ground, and by now there are also pictures of another bomb inside of the crater. So apparently the plane dropped 2 bombs and only one of them exploded. On the eastern front, north of the Seversky Donetsk, we have reports of Russian attacks close to Liman Pershi in the direction of Snikivka. Also Russian attacks in the direction of Nevske, Terny and Torske. Around Krymina, the fighting is continuing, especially in the Serebyanska forest. I cannot confirm any changes in the control of territory in this region. South of the Seversky Donetsk, we have fighting at Bilohorivka and at Spirne. There are some conflicting claims, I should say, by pro-Russian military bloggers. Some say that Spirne is captured and the fighting is continuing. Others say no, the fighting is still at Spirne. So the exact situation of the front line there is unconfirmed. Basically, though, no real changes in this front line either, because Spirne was contested a couple of days already, or even I think several weeks already. So no real changes in the control of territory in this region. Closer to Bakhmut, we have confirmed advances by the Russians west of Orikhovo, south of Orikhovo, Vasilivka. Here. So the Russians have advanced somewhat in this direction. This is Bakhmut, mind you. And in Bakhmut itself, at the 00506, this is this road going here, we have visual confirmation of the Russians being inside the trench that is along this tree line, which is no longer in existence really after a long shelling. The Ukrainians are on both sides of the trench, have their own trench systems. They are shelling it. We actually have confirmation that they have been in there because of a visual confirmation of this line being shelled already. So at this point, it's completely unclear. Some pro-Russian military bloggers claim the road has been captured. Others says no, that's not the case. It seems to be clear that they have gotten closer, but there is an extensive network of Ukrainian fortifications here, and the road was more or less unusable for quite a while now, as the Russians have crept close enough to directly hit anything that crosses here. So as of now, it seems more or less clear that this road is definitely blocked, whether the Russians have set their boot on it or not. But what is also more or less certain is that the trench lines behind the road are not in Russian hands yet. And as you can see here on the map, it's an elevated position. So the trench lines beyond the road are the ones that are protecting Ukrainian reinforcements, Ukrainian lines of communication further south into Khomove and into Bakhmut itself. And they, as of now, are still operational, even though the rain has made sure that it's probably mostly tracked vehicles that can use them in this very moment. In Bakhmut itself, the Russians are achieving further gains. Inside of the city, they advance at various positions, both in the north, in the south, as in the center. They've captured the train station and are in the civilian areas. in the housing areas, the residential areas beyond the train stations. So far, the control of the city is, depending on which source you take, 85, maybe 87%, somewhere in that ballpark is now in Russian hands. So the Ukrainians remain with 10 to 15% more or less of Bakhmut under their control. So this area here is all that is left. The Russians are also using FAB 500 bombs in support. Those are aerial bombs with 500 kilos, so a lot more explosive than a regular artillery shell. They're using those, mostly guided ones, against positions of the Ukrainians that are well fortified and well defended in the city. South of the city, the Russians have attacked in the direction of Stupochki. They were defeated in this regard, so the Russians are still trying to reach the TO504, that's the road going here into Bakhmut, to cut it west of Ivanivske, but so far their attempts have been a failure. They have not achieved anything. So, further south around Avdiivka, fighting is also continuing. North at Novobakhmutivka, the Russians are attacking. They are attacking here in the direction of Stepove. On Avdiivka itself, Siverne, Pervomaiske, and Nevelske. Opytne also further north, attacks are going. I cannot confirm that they have achieved anything in those attacks over the last few days. Marinka, fighting is continuing as well as in Pobieda. Novomikhailivka is also being attacked. The Russians are claiming they are trying a turning maneuver or to encircle the units in Marinka, but they don't seem to have been successful over the last few days to advance any further here. Further south, Russian attacks at Vuleda and at Prechystivka. So here and here the Russians are attacking north. There's a report about Ukrainian counterattacks at Vuleda, mostly supposedly reconnaissance and force. So the claims are the Ukrainians don't really try to push them back there yet, but there is some offensive activity by the Ukrainians reported in Vuleda. On the southern front, we have something interesting, and that is that here we have Riba. It's reporting that the Ukrainians have crossed the Dnipro River. And they have crossed it at here, at Kindika. So over here, supposedly the Ukrainians have established a foothold, a beachhead on the eastern side of the Dnipro in the Russian-held territory. We see the, thought I had the map here. Oh yeah, here. But the map is more or less not that detailed anyway. So supposedly they are attacking here over the river. While this is being called a big amphibious invasion, I found Twitter comments in this accordance. It doesn't really seem to be. We have, for instance, Igor Girkin, which we mention ever again on this channel. He said it's basically just an island in the floodplain, and further advances from there are not really feasible. So this is more for propaganda reasons than anything else. So while the Ukrainians have technically, and that seems to be a consensus inside of the pro-Russian military bloggers, that the Ukrainians have actually crossed the Dnipro, it's not like we will see a mechanized advance towards the Crimea in the near future. In Zaporizhzhia, there was offensive activity. We have here from the Russian military, from the Russian occupation side, reports that the Ukrainians have gained some ground in this area here. They have advanced further in the Zaporizhzhia region. All of this was supposedly, though, in the gray zone. So gray zone is the contested area that is not under solid control by one side. The Ukrainians have advanced somewhat in this area. This is in accordance to what the Ukrainian deputy defense minister said. They are saying we are attacking. The head of the occupation in Kherson was also saying that the boats that were confiscated in Henichesk, I reported about this in the last situation report, they are meant for the Russian armed forces in Kherson. So it seems they are meant to improve the mobility of the Russian armed forces, probably in the Dnipro, either here in the delta or along the river itself in the Kakhovka reservoir, so that this is already a removal of boats to take them away from potential Ukrainian usage in the context of a counteroffensive seems fairly unlikely in this context. It seems to actually be that they just confiscated some boats to increase the mobility of Russian armed forces there. Generally, when we can say about the front line, the preparations for the Ukrainian counteroffensives are clearly on their way. But what seems to be absolutely certain is that the offensive has not fully broken out yet. So this has to be seen in some context. We will not see a Ukrainian spearhead with hundreds of armored vehicles pushing down and just smashing everything in its way and keep pushing further south. While this is theoretically possible, the risk for the limited amount of supplies the Ukrainians have is far too high. Such a spearhead could obviously be attacked by Russian aviation, by Russian artillery, and every loss incurred in such a concentration of force would be close to irreplaceable for the Ukrainians. So it seems unlikely that we will see this. This is more reminiscent of the Kherson offensive, where in the first days we've had, mostly in the north, but also southeast of Mykolaiv, when the Ukrainians started their offensive in Kherson, they were taking really a handful of tiny villages, 5 to 10 villages or something. They moved the front line a little bit, but there was not a massive attack of hundreds of tanks and over days of massive offensive operations where they achieved breakthroughs, which were then exploited. Nothing of this was happening at that point. The Ukrainians were methodically moving forward, identifying Russian positions, destroying them, and advancing forward. We are not even at that point yet, from what I can see. But this is more in the ballpark what we would probably expect with the Ukrainian side, especially in regards to the heavy fortifications that the Russians have set up there. The Ukrainians have every tool available to overcome those fortifications, but they need to be wisely using those as they are kind of limited. So what we should expect that we should not expect the Ukrainians to do a frontal assault into the Russian positions, but that they are advancing step by step systematically after a proper preparation of the fortifications of the front lines with artillery, with reconnaissance, taking out strong points, Russian strong points. This right now seems more like a probing of the front line to leave the Russians uncertain where exactly the main real offensive will start. Operations here along the Dnipro seem completely pointless. What is the point of occupying a tiny town on the other bank of the river if you cannot use it to advance further? But every operation like this will force a Russian reaction to that, even if it's just 40 soldiers on a tiny island. What if they take the next island and then the next and then the next, and at some point they might be able to advance further? So from this regard, the Russians cannot remove reserves here. They have to react to Ukrainian advances over the river to a certain extent at least. So what we see here is probably the Russians basically being fixed by the Ukrainians along a wider front line, by the Ukrainians starting to probe the front line in preparation of their big offensive. Now, the big offensive itself has, as said, probably not really started yet, but what we can see here is the clear preparation in advance of it. How long it will take until it start, it's probably several weeks, and it might be actually slowly increasing in intensity, as said, because the Ukrainians don't have the volume of material that they can risk heavy losses for a breakthrough, which might decide a lot, but which would lose them valuable material that is close to being irreplaceable for them. When it comes to the to the mobilization, we have more and more accusations that mobilized personnel is being forced to join Wagner. Prigozhin declines that. Everyone is just volunteering, and Wagner does not recruit regular soldiers that are currently in employment. The Ukrainian military intelligence, GUR, has published a phone call, though, that they claim to have recorded, according to which the BARS, which is the volunteer reserve of the Russian armed forces, is basically being disassembled, is being ended. Their soldiers the contracts are no longer extended, but their fighters are meant to join either Wagner or Redat, which is a PMC as well that is run by the Ministry of Defense. It's interesting that supposedly now the shift is going back to the PMCs, but after the disappointing results of the Russian Armed Forces' performance, which basically have gained a few meters around Kremina and a few meters here at Vorichna, and at Vuhledar they gained the Dachas. That was more or less it over several months of offensive operations, of attacks by the Russians. The only halfway visible success is at Bakhmut, and here it's spearheaded by Wagner. So it seems like the Russians are actually moving away from focusing on the military and moving back to focusing on the PMCs. Whether that's a smart move is a totally different story, though, as amateurs which are in the PMC might achieve short-time goals, but we will have to see how successful this is going to be. In this regard, though, we have an interesting video of a Russian recruitment video. You can see it here. I'm going to play it in the background. That is addressing the current jobs that the men have in regards to whether they are real men. And you see, for instance, the heavyweight, the weightlifter has here, and my little stream technician is coming and trying to sabotage us here. Oh, you're not going to turn this off? I'll just let it play for you in the background while I readjust my script, the rest of the script, so I don't do a mistake here. You're a man, so join the Russian Armed Forces and become a contract soldier. An interesting advertisement here for the Russian Armed Forces. When it comes to the international support, we have reports by Denmark and the Netherlands that they are going to buy 14 Leopard 2A4. The source of those are unknown, and they will be delivered to Ukraine, but only according to the data that is currently available in 2024, because they have to basically rebuild from the ground up. So they are probably from some depot that is where they are in a very bad shape. Spain might be a potential source of this, because we've heard in the past that the Spanish Leopard 2A4 are in a sad state in regards to how combat ready they are. Russia is stopping the delivery of S-400 and replacement parts to India. The reports are about 10 billion in value, which they are not going to deliver to India because India is incapable of paying for those weapon deliveries, while as it is as using dollars would break US sanctions. The Russians themselves are not willing to accept payment in rupees, in Indian rupees, and the Indians are not willing to buy rubles and pay it with this. So right now, the Bloomberg is reporting that the delivery of the weaponry is halted when it comes to this. Other reports were saying that this is because the Russians need more air defense system. That seems to not be the case. It seems that this actually is a payment issue because the Russian side is, as of now, not short on air defense system, at least not yet. We have here a collection of pictures of the Lancet cages, which are basically nets that are being installed around artillery pieces, because the Russians have switched to counter battery fire with the Lancet drones. We can see various different examples here of the nets being put up. I've mentioned it in the past, and in this regard you can see more examples here. And at the same time, we have an image here. This is a little older though, but this shows a Lancet that was actually caught by one of those nets. So they seem to be somewhat effective. There are some images moving around now of them being ineffective. Supposedly claims are that the Russians changed the fuse of it to detonate before actually hitting, so it does not get caught in this, but this is unconfirmed as of now, and obviously the further away the detonation happens from the target, the less the damage will be. So it is unclear yet to what extent those modifications of the fuse are actually happening and to what extent they will be successful. We have an image here of supposedly Jordanian air defense missiles on an OSA system. If this is true, then Jordan has once more supplied Ukraine, probably over some proxies, with more weaponry. In the past, we talked about the difficulties of the Ukrainian side to replenish their air defense systems, their air defense missiles. This is one source, at least, where there has been some replenishment. Also, Turkish multiple launch rocket systems have appeared in Ukraine. It's the TRLG-230, 70-kilometer range, 230 millimeter multiple rocket system that is in use by Ukraine. And we have an image here of them. Another image not really directly related to the military support, but we see here an excavator that is modified to basically run a flail system to clear mines, armored cabin, and supposedly this is now being used in Ukraine and being prepared to be used more widely. As you can see, it's clearly a modification from a regular excavator that has received add-on armor and a flail here to detonate mines to clear minefields. And there is some amusement about this picture of an up-armored MTLB with tracks that are being used to add on armor. Interesting system. Another example of the Russians trying to add on armor. As you can see here, the comments on the site are somewhat amusing, but I just want to remind you of this historic picture of Sherman tanks. So this is nothing new, and this is something that soldiers always like to do. If they are sitting in something where they feel they can be damaged by weaponry, they try their best to improve their armor. And tank tracks are made of solid steel. They are fairly resistant, so they have some protective quality. Whether that's going to be enough to defeat whatever is shot at the MTLB is a different story, obviously, but this is an example of this here. And finally, I have a video here of a German Gepard air defense, self-propelled air defense. And as you can see, it has shot down markings. An interesting video in this regard. 3 Shahed and 2 probably Caliber that was shot down by this German-delivered air defense system in Ukraine. That was it from me for now. I hope you found it interesting. If so, I would like, it would really help the channel if you gave it a thumbs up, leave a comment for the algorithm, and no, you don't sabotage my microphone. Leave a comment for the algorithm, and if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. This channel is only possible because of the support from viewers like you, so if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. Thank you very much to everyone already supporting the channel. That was it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.